So when your model is ready, you can switch to wireframe view and find out that this mesh that you have may be a little bit too dense and a little bit too redundant. So if you zoom in, you can see that there are lots of these squeezed triangles, which are not really very informative here. We don't really need them, and they still increase the amount of polygons that we have in a model. So we have 1.5 million polygons over here, and some of them are just redundant here. So what you can do is you can do remesh or do simplification. So we have a remesh button over here and simplification over there. But these two are slightly different. So let's start with remesh. So first of all, we used resolution. For this one, we used resolution 0.6, I think, with radius hole filling of 3 millimeters or something. So I'm clicking OK. If I use the same step for remeshing, 0.6, it will just recalculate the surface and replace all these triangles with other triangles, which are going to be equilateral. And there will be no squeezed triangles, as you can see, so it looks tidy and neat. But you have to be careful, because if you set too higher values, so for example, if you set like 1 millimeter, you're going to lose some of the data that you're going to need. Also, what's important is that remesh is in many ways redundant. So you can see this big flat area, and we have quite dense triangles here. So it doesn't really make much sense in terms of preserving space. And in this case, simplification might be really useful. So if I go to simplification, I can set absolute value, let's say 1 million polygons, or I can choose percentage of the current amount. So we now have 1.5 million, and let's say I want to simplify it in half. So I'll set 50% and click apply. It will recalculate the surface once again, but in the places where the surface is relatively flat, it will use bigger triangles, and it will preserve smaller triangles for areas where geometry changes drastically. Okay, so what you can see, the density of triangles, if I take this one-sided brush, so if I select this area over here and select this area over here, you can see that the density here is quite different. Another thing that we can show is that if I, for example, do remesh one more time as 0.6, I can then smooth out this side a little bit, and we will see what's going to happen with this area after simplification. And you will see that if you have a smooth area, which just means that the angle between triangles is smaller. So if I smooth out this area a little bit, I'm going to shaded view. If I smooth out this area, you will see that it is now way smoother than this area over here. So we have this rough surface, and in this case it's just less rough and more slick. Okay, so if I now simplify this in half, you will see that the density of triangles will be higher over here, because there is more to save in terms of geometrical changes than on this side, because this side is basically smoothed out, so it's just more flat, and therefore it needs smaller amount of triangles to represent this surface. So if I go to the wireframe view, yeah, you can see that right away. So here is the density of triangles in the area where I smoothed it. So if I select it a little bit, you can see what's the average distance between the vertices. And if I select it over here, which is our normal point cloud, our normal mesh, it's much denser here. But it's even more dense over here because this is the bend where the geometry changes significantly. So it just tries to save as many triangles as possible to preserve this area. That will be the same in other areas. So for example, if we look at this bend, you can see that over here, the density of triangles is much higher than, let's say, over here. So if I zoom in, you can see that triangles are bigger here because this is a flatter area than this one. Okay, so you can use both simplification and remesh as a way to reduce the amount of triangles in a model. So what most people don't realize is that in many cases you don't really need highest quality model for your purposes. So if you make highest quality model, it probably will contain too many triangles to be practical. It's difficult to work with, it takes up a lot of space. So sometimes simplifying it a bit or making a remesh is a good way to reduce the amount of triangles. Plus, you can just make your mesh look a little bit nicer. So in case of remesh, all triangles will be more or less of the same size. And in case of simplification, you will just remove needless triangles from the mesh and only leave them where those triangles are needed. All right.